See, I'm learning. I'm learning a little bit about music. I know it, but I just can't sing it. Hebrews chapter 12. We're looking forward to a good month, and then we're going to have practice today for the Christmas songs choir. Dottie she told me that she wasn't feeling good, and she started for church and then called me, said she had to turn around and go home. So she got some bug this morning or something, and so, but I know she'll catch up with it. But on December the 26th, that's the lowest, used typically the lowest Sunday of the year. Between Christmas and New Year's, everybody's gone home. And I was pastored a church down in Deep East Texas, and that usually Easter, Mother's Day, and that Sunday was packed because everybody come to see all the senior citizens in the church, and we always had everybody come home. So in these city churches, everybody leaves and goes somewhere else. We're family, and that's okay to do that. But on December the 26th, we're going to have a little extra. We're going to have Sparks Are Going to Fly that day. I tell you what we've got. Our whole family, my family, is coming in and going to be here in the service. And so Whitney is our piano player in the family. She's going to play for us. We'll get Brian to lead music for us. Amanda's going to sing a special for us. Brian's oldest son's going to play some musical instrument for us. We're going to have Sparks Are Going to Fly that day. So we're going to put them all to work, do as much as we can out of them, because it's rare, very rare, that my family gets to be together at church in one time. And so we got some talent in the family, so we'll just let them to do it, because they'll bring a fair group with them. We'll have a lot of visitors that day. Hebrews chapter 12, beginning in verse 1, it says, "Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him that endureth such contradiction of sinners against himself, lest ye be wearied and faint in your minds." Now, the apostle has been speaking of the Christian race and giving directions for its successful accomplishment. The only sport that I was ever involved in when I was in high school was track. And I really wasn't big enough for football, although we were a small school, I probably could, but I was always working a lot. But the track is the one thing that I did, and I did very well with that. And there was times early in the season we had these weights that go around your ankle, and you'd have to get out there and run. And I did pretty good with running. When you're small as I am, you have to be able to run from the big guys, don't you? You don't dare let them catch you, and so that's where I guess I got that. But anyway, but when it came down to the race time, you take those weights off, because they're going to slow you down a little bit. They may build a little muscle in practice, but you're not going to win with those weights on there, and you're running some of those long races. So you had to take those off. Let us lay aside every weight and the sin which does so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. Now, the greatest example of people that have been subject to being weary and fainting is Jesus Christ. And no one was subject to that condition any more than he was. And so I want to talk about that today, weary and faint. Now, the first half of the message, I'm going to get you all depressed, okay? The second half, I'm going to dig you back out of that a little bit, because I want to talk about the things in life that cause us to weary and be faint faints and how that we can overcome them. So if you go to the doctor, you don't feel good, and you go to the doctor, you want him to tell you, you want him to know two things. One is what's wrong with you, right? Isn't it difficult to go to a doctor and you're sick and you're in pain and you hurt, and they come in there scratching that? Well, I don't know what's wrong with you. You can't fix it if you don't know what's wrong with them, can you? So you want him to know what's wrong with you. And number two, how's he going to fix it? What can we do about it? How can we make this well again? Those are two things. And so that's what I'm dealing with today. First of all, what's wrong with us? And secondly, how do we fix it? What does it take to fix that condition? So the first thing that I want to talk about in this subject, first of all, the evils that causes us to be weary and to faint. What are the things in life? What are we exposed to that causes us in this life to be weary and to want to faint? So there's several things which may produce this weariness, some at a greater degree than others, sometimes more than one at one time. But anyway, here are some of the things that may cause us to be weary in this life. First of all, it may arise from being partially sanctified nature of Christ. In other words, we may not be as spiritual as we ought to be, and we suffer because of that. You know, sometimes people are fretting over things in this life, and they most of the time we worry about, 90% of the time we worry about things never going to happen, don't we? And we fret about things in this life. You know, sometimes, our tendency is to put our arm around each other and say, oh, Lord bless you, things are going to get better, and all that. You know, sometimes Jesus is pointing his finger and says, "O ye of little faith." Didn't I tell you? Didn't I tell you? What are you worried about? Didn't I tell you? And sometimes we need a good shaking from the Lord because our faith gets low. We worry about things we ought not to worry about, and it's because our spiritual nature has been allowed to become weary because we haven't kept up our prayer life, our Bible study, our worship life like we ought to have. So sometimes in life, we have to contend with our own carnal nature, don't we? Our own nature is just against us. We have that inward nature that's born again, but God has seen fit to leave us here in this life for the time being, that spiritual nature living inside this carnal, physical nature. And we just got it to contend with. It's there, and we don't. Now, why did God do that? Well, God left us in our carnal nature, in the flesh, but inwardly we're born again because we have the potential to be the best witnesses for Christ of any creature there is. Even the angels can't do it. Now, if God had just zapped us inside and out, and we're born again, and we got these glorified bodies, we wouldn't be near as effective. But you see, the world can see what God has done for us and how we've been able to overcome the world, and we can have and be a greater influence on the world to bring them from Christ. If God has done that for us, look what He can do for them. And sometimes they look at it. And you know, when the people that you work with that don't like being around Christians, when they get neck deep in trouble, who are they going to go looking to? They're going to go looking for the Christian people for the answers that they need. And so God left us as a spiritual creature inside a carnal body. And folk, we got that to contend with until the shout or until the Lord takes us out of this world. Paul said that when he would do good, evil is present with him. And so it's our moral nature, through its frailties and wickedness, sometimes causes us to be wearisome and to be weak. And so sometimes even we have a dark mind, a cold heart, and a spirit that's lethargic, and we're in danger of being wearisome even in our own minds because we live in this body that's still carnal. Secondly, there are the inevitable duties which pertain to this life. Okay? Now, we may be weary and we may be weak and feel faint because of our own carnal selves, but because of the toils of this life, because of the difficulties, the trouble, toil for the bread that we eat. We have to work by the sweat of the brow for our food. And so sometimes our work, situations at your work, situations with being able to work, situations with finding work. So our work may cause us to feel weak and faint. Sometimes family cares can be a burden to us. Sometimes we have to care for others who have a physical burden and a handicap, and we become wearisome. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about, don't you? Some of you here right now are going through some of those very things, the toil, the wearisome of having to deal with family that has a physical issue or a problem and trying to care for them. How about business anxieties? I'll tell you what, balancing your checkbook can be a real depressing thing at the end of the month, can't it? And our business affairs and things that are going on and so much. How can we get it done? We got so much to do and all these things going on. I know some of y'all have retired. Have you ever wondered after you retired how you ever got anything done? Because you haven't been any less busy, have you? And with all the little details of things that are going on. I just got my notice the other day that one of the cars, it's time for registration. Well, you got to stop what you're doing. You got to go get it inspected, and you got to go all the way down to get in line at the courthouse. Just no big deal. But when you got a whole bunch of those little deals going on in the same day, it becomes wearisome, doesn't it? All those things. I make a list of things to do today, and I got about 25 lines on there, and sometimes I fill that up and turn it over and start writing on the back. Little details, little things. Go to the bank, go to the post office, do here, do this, do that, answer that. And then I spent, you wonder what does a preacher do after he only works a day and a half a week. Well, I've been busy this week answering some emails for some preachers about some subjects of the Old Testament. I like doing that. I'm glad I'm able to do that, and that's part of my ministry. But all these things begin to add up. So many things that have to be attended to. It's sometimes difficult to get everything done, and then I declare when we're the busiest, something else happens, and then something else gets left undone that should have been done, and so on. So the earthly tendencies, things going on in the world, have a tendency to clog our soul and to keep us in an unhealthy atmosphere and become weariness and choke the good seed. Demas, the Bible says, Paul talked about a companion named Demas, and how that Demas hath forsaken Christ. He said, having loved the present world, the things of the world, got to him, so to the point that he had forsaken Christ. Now, the third thing is the various temptations to which we are exposed to. Temptations come from every direction in every season of life, some from the world, some from Satan. And so we just have to contend with those temptations. Actually, the name of our enemy is Legion, isn't it? Legion, there's many of them. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 13 says, wherefore take unto you the whole armor of God. Now this is where we have to be able to defend. He said, take on the whole armor of God that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, having done all to stand. Next verse, stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. Now, all these different armors that you have to have, with the temptations that come to us. Well, we have to have the breastplate, our feet properly covered, the shield of faith, and the helmet of salvation, which is the Word of God. And then the last verse says, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, and watching thereunto with all perseverance and supplication for all saints. Whew. Now the devil is after us big time, isn't he? As a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. So we have all kinds of things that we got to watch out for. We got to watch out for the personal duties that we have in this life. We have to watch out for our own spiritual condition. And then the devil is after us from the beginning to the end, chases us all the way to the grave. Then there are sometimes the reproaches and the persecutions of men. You know, the offense of the cross is still out there. Evil men are haters of spiritual things. And I will tell you something. We have over in the old country called Burma, called Myanmar now, we have some missionaries that we don't really know where they are. A whole village of our people. We have a church there, Missionary Baptist Church in Myanmar, and they're out hid in the jungle without a place to live, without a hut or shelter, and without enough food and clothing, hiding from the government forces because they're out to kill them. They went into their village, they burned their village and destroyed it. They got notice that they were coming. They escaped out of the village. Now they're out there in the jungle somewhere trying to survive. All because they're Christians. You ever listen to some of the hate talk of some of our government leaders? Scary, folks. Scary. Would they ever do that in America? Not to us. These kids could. You know. So one of the concerns that we have in life is the persecution that might come our way and that we have to deal with. And so evil men, they're haters of religion. Jesus warned that parents would betray and abuse their children, and children would hate their parents. That often, he went on to say that often a man's foes will be of his own household. Luke chapter 21, beginning verse 12. He says, before all these, they shall lay their hands on you and persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues and into prisons, being brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. And it shall turn to you for a testimony. Settle it therefore in your hearts, not to meditate before what ye shall answer. For I will give you a mouth and wisdom, which all your adversaries shall not be able to gainsay nor resist. And ye shall be betrayed both by parents and brethren and kinfolks and friends, and some of you shall they cause to be put to death. And ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake. So one of the concerns of life that causes us to be weary is some of the treatment and hate that we receive at the hands of people today. And so there are troubles and afflictions of life. There are bodily infirmities and maladies. You know, Jacob. How about Job? Hezekiah, Paul, and many others suffered fleshly afflictions. Job said, yet man is born unto trouble as the sparks fly upward. Well, man, listen, there's going to be trouble. Let me tell you that. Don't misunderstand that life is supposed to be perfect. There's going to be trouble in the world. And then, last of all, some of the things that causes us to be weary is gloomy predictions of the future. Well, don't watch too much news, folks. Don't watch that stuff. I don't care if it is true. You can get so caught up in that negativism, nobody wants to listen to you. That news sometimes can be too bad. And so people have a gloomy forecast of the times in which we live. Because understand, and I'm going to get to this, God still has everything under control. That's when you get been out of shape, is when you forget God has things under control. In some cases, it's not just fears and gloomy horizon in the place where we live, but it is death, judgment, and the hereafter. And sometimes people come to the end of life, they begin to be troubled by that. Paul told the Corinthians, he said, we're troubled on every side, yet not distressed. Did y'all hear that? We are troubled on every side, but not distressed. We are perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Cast down, but not destroyed. Always bearing about in the body the dying of the Lord Jesus, that the life also of Jesus might be made manifest in our body. For we which live are always delivered unto death for Jesus' sake, that the life also of Jesus might be made manifest in our mortal flesh. So then death worketh in us, but life in you. So having looked at the dark side, got you down, let's look at the positive side, the remedy. In verse 2, he said, we are called to look to Jesus and to ponder over the circumstances of this life. First, consider what Christ endured. He said, such contradictions of sinners against himself. Well, think of the names that he was called, the lies that were told on him. He was in Capernaum healing and teaching, healing lepers, doing good. And the evil Jews rose up against him, and it says, and all they in the synagogue, when they heard these things, were filled with wrath, and rose up and thrust him out of the city, and led him to the brow of the hill, whereupon their city was built, that they might cast him down headlong. But he, passing through the midst of them, went his way. That's one of the few times that we actually believe that Jesus just disappeared. That he used his Godhead and worked a miracle for his behalf. That he just disappeared in their midst. Well, when we consider the dignity of Christ when he was being accused, he spoke not an evil word against them. He cursed not back in return. He took it with dignity. And the spirit in which he was treated, he wearied not, he fainted not, he held his course. And said in Hebrews 5:7, who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and supplications, with strong crying and tears unto him that was able to save him from death, and was heard that he feared. What did he do? He cried out with strong crying and tears unto him that was able. His aim was to glorify the Father and to save the world. And as we're told in our text in verse 2, looking unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. Well, in the middle of all these struggles that we go through in this life, and we will. And you know, that's one of the hardest parts about being pastor, is trying to comfort and help people who are in the middle of troubles and tragedies. Y'all remember, it's been a couple of years or so that Brother Darrell Owens came up here and preached for you. You know, Brother Darrell Owens was one of the most loved and thought of brethren in our work. Taught at TBI, well loved and thought of. He had a little trouble with his balance and fell one day and broke his hip. Went to the hospital to have hip surgery and will never come out of a nursing home. Discovered that he had several conditions that's going to keep him bedfast. And Lord willing, I have a seminar in the area where he is in the spring. I want to go visit with him. But now, you know, one day life is great, and the next day it's different. That can happen to us, folk. But what do we do about it? What do we do about it? We look unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. We look to him and understand that this life is only temporary, and that after this life it only gets good and better for us. So how can we apply this to our circumstances? Well, one of the things it will do is to lead us to humility. And when we are in a mental state of humility, when we have humility, we don't demand and expect more from God than we ought to. Okay? Some people blame God for their troubles. They get angry with God. And they blame God for their troubles. And even think God made a mistake. God never made a mistake. And it will humble us when we have a humble heart. Having humility will enable us to deal with some of the issues that life brings about. Just a humble attitude. Kind of like old Job, sitting there in sackcloth and ashes. Naked I came into the world, and naked I'll go out. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Can you bless God in everything that comes your way? Well, that comes with humility. It will lead us to a cheerful resignation. So I can't run up and down the stairs like I used to. I come down those stairs today, and I had to be real careful going downstairs. I used to run up downstairs. I used to never walk upstairs. I had 2 steps at a time running up. That was good energy. I just did it. I don't do that anymore. A lot of things I can't do anymore. I can't just jump up in the morning and head out. I got to sit there for a little while and get my brain, Y'all know what I'm talking about. I can see the ones out there smiling. They know what I'm talking about. But we can't always do the things we used to do, and we must learn to cheerfully resign to the fact we can't do it. You can grow old and bitter and mean, or you can cheerfully accept what life brings. It comes that way. It's up to us as to which attitude we're going to have. It'll lead us to greater fortitude, not to grow weary, not to faint, but to be faithful unto death. That we're not going to quit. Fortitude, just dogged determination that it's not going to beat you. Not going to beat you. It will lead us to prayer, which in turn leads us to Christ. And so we have a closer relationship to the Lord in a case like that. It will lead us, consider this. Hebrews 2:9 says, but we see Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels for the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor. The crown comes after the cross. Now, if we endure suffering in this life for whatever reason, and we have trouble in this life, and we endure it, there's a crown for that. Don't lose your crown by getting bitter and mad and angry and bent out of shape. Hang in there, okay? Believing in and trusting Christ because He went through things that you'll and I'll never go through. He suffered on that cross, and we'll never endure what He went through. If He had to go through that, who am I that I think I'm better than He is, that I won't ever have to go through any difficulties or troubles or disappointments in life? Okay? So we can just kind of make up our own mind how we're going to do this. Now, there's a reward. There's a reward for enduring the difficult things of life with a godly attitude. There is a special reward for that. Let's don't lose it. Let's don't lose it. Don't let the world get you down. In whatever state that you're in, you can give God honor and glory. And so just trust God and use it for His honor and glory, and cheerfully endure in life what you have to endure, but do it for the honor and the glory of God. I'd like for us to have our invitation. Let's come. So